Franklin Cole had lived long enough to know that some things in life come and go, but a few treasures hold the kind of weight that anchors your soul. For him, it was his Harley Davidson, a black and chrome beast that had carried him across deserts, mountains, and winding back roads for more than 3 decades. He loved his family more than anything, of course, but if there was one possession that stood as a living piece of his identity, it was that Harley. To Franklin, it wasn't just steel and rubber, it was a time machine, a scrapbook, a connection to the woman he had once loved with all his heart and lost too soon. Every morning, before the world around Ridgefield truly woke up, Franklin would pad into his garage with a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and run his fingers along the Harley's frame as if greeting an old friend. That garage wasn't just a space for tools and motor oil, it was a gallery of his life. On the wall hung his late wife Margaret's leather jacket, still carrying the faint scent of wind and rain from rides they'd taken together. An old rally sticker, peeling at the edges, clung stubbornly to the tank, placed there by Margaret during a rally in Texas where she had laughed so hard she nearly fell off the back seat. A dent on the fender spoke of a night they got caught in a storm in Oregon, pulling into a roadside shack soaked to the bone, laughing like teenagers. Franklin would sit on the worn stool in the corner, sipping his coffee, and those memories would come alive, so vivid he could almost hear Margaret's laughter echoing in the room. But life has a way of placing storms where you least expect them. Franklin's granddaughter, Lily, had been born with a rare autoimmune condition, and though she was only 8 years old, she had already spent more time in hospitals than playgrounds. She was a fighter, her spirit as bright as her smile, but the bills that came with her treatments weighed like chains on the family. Franklin's son Daniel did his best, working long hours at the local plant, but the numbers never seemed to add up. That fateful morning, Daniel laid the bills across Franklin's kitchen table, his voice breaking as he explained that the new treatment Lily needed simply wasn't affordable anymore. Franklin sat in silence, his weathered hands folded together, his eyes drifting toward the garage door. He didn't need Daniel to tell him what had to be done. He already knew. For years, Franklin had sworn he'd never part with the Harley, that it would remain in the family as a legacy, a rolling monument to the life he'd built with Margaret. But now the choice wasn't between memory and metal. It was between clinging to the past or giving his granddaughter a future. That night, Franklin sat in the garage longer than ever before. He rested Margaret's jacket across his knees and opened a saddlebag where he kept old photographs. As he shuffled through them, one note slipped free, yellowed with age, but the handwriting still strong and familiar. It was Margaret's. She had written it years earlier, tucked away without telling him, as if she knew one day he would need her words more than anything. "Frank," it read, "if you're ever torn between holding on to memories or protecting the ones you love, remember this: family comes first." "I'll always ride with you, no matter what." Franklin pressed the note to his chest, his tears wetting the paper. He whispered to the silence, "I know what you'd tell me to do, Maggie." I know. For hours he polished the Harley until it gleamed, even though it was already spotless. Every bolt, every scratch, every memory seemed to shine brighter under the single hanging bulb. He took one last long look at the machine, knowing tomorrow it would be gone. His heart ached with the weight of the decision, but he also felt its strange calm, the kind of peace that only comes when you know you are doing the right thing, no matter how much it hurts. The next morning, Franklin made the call to Granger's Motorcycles, a local dealer who specialized in classics. His voice cracked slightly as he introduced himself and said he had a Harley to sell. When the man on the other end asked what year, Franklin answered softly, 1985 Heritage. Kept her 35 years, still runs like the day she was born. After he hung up, Franklin walked back into the garage and placed Margaret's note on the workbench, right beside Lily's crayon drawings that covered the fridge in the kitchen. He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the Harley, and whispered, "One last ride, old friend. One last ride." The morning air in Ridgefield carried a crisp bite as Franklin wheeled the Harley out of the garage for what he knew would be his final ride. The rising sun cast a golden glow over the quiet town, and for a moment he simply stood there, helmet in hand, listening to the familiar groan of the kickstand and the deep rumble as the engine came alive. That sound was more than noise to him. It was a heartbeat, a reminder of every mile traveled with Margaret at his side. As he eased onto Main Street, memories unfolded with each turn of the wheels. He passed the diner where he and Margaret had spent countless Sunday mornings sharing pancakes and laughter. He cruised by the Ridgefield Fairgrounds, where Lily had once begged him for cotton candy, her tiny fingers sticky and her smile wide. He took the back roads that wound through the woods, the same ones where Margaret used to spread her arms out wide and let the wind rush through her fingers like invisible ribbons. Every corner of the ride whispered their history, each familiar landmark tugging at his heart. Franklin felt the sting of tears mixing with the breeze against his face, but he let them fall freely. This wasn't a goodbye out of weakness, it was a farewell filled with love. By the time he returned to the driveway, the Harley gleamed in the morning light, its chrome polished brighter than ever. Franklin spent another hour wiping it down, his hand lingering over the tank where Margaret's sticker had faded but never peeled away. It was his way of honoring her, of making sure the bike looked as proud as it felt, even in its final moments with him. When the truck from Granger's Motorcycles pulled up later that afternoon, Franklin's stomach knotted. Cal Granger, a mechanic with kind eyes and oil-stained hands, stepped out and greeted him respectfully. Franklin could see the recognition in Cal's face. This wasn't just any sale. They both knew it. Franklin steadied his breath as he handed over the papers. Cal offered him a fair price, enough to cover Lily's treatment, and Franklin accepted it without bargaining. For a man who had spent his life haggling over parts and deals, this time there was no hesitation. When the Harley was loaded onto the trailer and the engine's final echo faded into the distance, Franklin stood in the driveway, his shoulders heavy, his heart raw. The garage, once filled with the warmth of memories, now felt cavernous and cold. That evening, Daniel brought Lily over for dinner. She was still in her school clothes, her hair tied back with a pink ribbon, and her crayons stuffed in her little backpack. As soon as she stepped into the garage on her way inside, she froze. The space where the Harley had always stood, like a guardian of the family, was empty. Her wide eyes turned to Franklin. "Grandpa, where's your motorcycle?" she asked, her voice trembling with both curiosity and fear. Franklin knelt down, his knees creaking, and took her small hands in his. His eyes were wet, but his voice stayed steady. "Sweetheart, I had to sell it," he explained softly, "to help pay for the medicine you need." Lily's lower lip quivered, her innocent eyes filling with tears. "Are you mad at me?" she whispered. The question struck Franklin like a knife. He pulled her close into his chest, holding her as if the world itself depended on it. "No, Pumpkin," he said, his voice breaking. "I could never be mad at you. You're the most important thing in the world to me. Your grandma would be so proud of you." Lily sniffled, burying her face into his shoulder, her small arms wrapping around his neck. For a moment, the empty garage didn't feel so empty anymore. Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep on the couch with her crayon box still open beside her, Franklin stepped back into the garage alone. He stared at the vacant space, the ghost of the Harley still echoing in his mind. Margaret's jacket still hung on the hook, Elaine's helmet beside it, but now the silence was deafening. He whispered into the emptiness, "I hope I did right by you, Maggie. I hope you'd understand." His voice cracked as he placed Lily's latest drawing, a picture of herself holding hands with him, on the workbench, right next to Margaret's old note. Family came first. He'd kept that promise. What Franklin didn't know was that this decision, made in the quiet corners of his own grief and love, was about to ripple far beyond Ridgefield, touching hearts and roads he never imagined. Jason Miller had worked as a mechanic at Granger's Motorcycles for nearly 15 years, and in that time he had seen hundreds of men sell their bikes. Some sold them to upgrade, others because they were too old to ride, and a few because life had demanded a sacrifice. But something about Franklin Cole that day haunted Jason in a way he couldn't shake. He had stood beside Franklin when the Harley was loaded onto the trailer. He'd seen the man's trembling hands, the way his gaze clung to the bike as though it were the last tether to a world he could never fully explain. Franklin hadn't begged, hadn't complained. He'd simply signed the papers with quiet dignity, his weathered face lined with pain and love all at once. That night, Jason sat in his small apartment above the shop, staring at his laptop as the glow from the screen lit up the tired lines around his eyes. He logged into Iron Circle Riders, an online forum for bikers across the Midwest, and typed out a post, "Met a Vietnam vet today, sold his Harley after 35 years, not because he wanted to, but because his granddaughter needs medicine. Never seen a man so strong and so broken at the same time." Reminded me what real brotherhood means. Family before Chrome. He hit send, not realizing he had just set something extraordinary into motion. Within hours, replies flooded in. Some asked for details, others shared stories of their own sacrifices, and many wanted to help. Jason updated the post, adding Franklin's name, his town, and a little about Lily's illness. By morning, the thread had exploded. Riders from Ohio to Montana had seen it, and the momentum was building. Veterans clubs pledged support, women's riding groups promised donations, and custom builders offered parts. A chapter president from Colorado commented, "We're in. Let's build this man something better." A painter in Texas volunteered custom work. A chrome specialist in Detroit offered to handle finishing free of charge. It wasn't just sympathy, it was action. Riders began coordinating fundraisers and deliveries. Parts were shipped across 6 states, each piece touched by someone who understood what Franklin had given up. A movement was taking shape, a rolling tide of respect and love that transcended miles of asphalt. For Franklin, life returned to quiet routines. He mowed his lawn, fixed Lily's tricycle, and tried not to let his eyes linger too long on the empty spot in the garage. On one cool Saturday morning, he was kneeling in the driveway, tightening the bolts on Lily's little bike while she drew chalk flowers on the pavement. The neighborhood was calm, birdsong mixing with the scratch of chalk against concrete. That was when Franklin heard it, a low, steady rumble in the distance. At first, he thought it was just a couple of bikes riding through Ridgefield. But the sound grew louder, deeper, until the ground itself seemed to vibrate. Lily froze, her chalk dropping from her hand. "Grandpa?" she asked with wide eyes. "What's that noise?" Franklin stood slowly, wiping his hands on a rag, his heart thumping in his chest. The rumbles swelled into a chorus, an army of engines roaring in perfect harmony. And then they appeared. The first Harley turned onto Franklin Street, its chrome flashing in the morning sun. Behind it came another and another, until a wave of motorcycles poured into the cul-de-sac. Neighbors stepped onto porches, phones raised, their mouths open in disbelief. Franklin's breath caught as he counted not 10, Not 50, but hundreds. 200 riders, men and women of every age, filling his quiet street with leather jackets, patches and helmets, gleaming like armor. Engines cut one by one, the thunder fading into a reverent silence. At the front, a bike rolled to a stop at Franklin's driveway. The rider removed his helmet and Franklin recognized Jason Miller, the mechanic from Granger's. Jason's eyes were steady but filled with emotion. "Mr. Cole," he called, his voice strong but respectful. Franklin stepped forward, Lily clutching his hand tightly. Jason continued. "Word of what you did for your granddaughter spread across the country. We wanted to show you what that sacrifice meant." He gestured to the street lined with riders, each one sitting tall, watching silently, their presence heavy with respect. Franklin's throat tightened, his vision blurring. He had never seen anything like it. This wasn't just a gathering. It was a statement, a living, breathing testament to the meaning of true brotherhood. Franklin stood frozen at the edge of his driveway, the morning sunlight pouring across a sea of riders. 200 motorcycles, gleaming chrome and rumbling engines, had converged on his quiet street. Neighbors lined their porches, phones recording, but for Franklin it all felt surreal, as if he had stepped into someone else's life. Jason Miller climbed off his bike and approached, his helmet tucked under one arm. He nodded respectfully before speaking. "Mr. Cole, this is for you." At his signal, several riders wheeled forward a flatbed trailer that had been waiting at the end of the block. A large tarp covered the cargo. Franklin's chest tightened as Jason and two others untied the ropes and pulled the cover back. The breath caught in Franklin's throat. There, gleaming brighter than he had ever seen, was a 1985 Harley Heritage, rebuilt from the frame up. Its chrome sparkled, its leather seat was stitched with care, and engraved across the tank were the words, "Family First." On one handlebar hung a brand new pink helmet, small enough for Lily. Franklin's knees weakened, his hands trembling as he stepped closer. He ran his weathered palm across the polished tank, tears streaming down his cheeks. I don't understand," he whispered. Jason placed a hand on his shoulder. "This bike was built by riders from all across the country. The paint came from Arizona, the chrome from Detroit, the engine work from Denver. Everyone who touched it knew your story, and they built it with love." And that's not all. He handed Franklin an envelope. Inside was a check, a collection gathered by riders from dozens of states, enough to cover Lily's medical needs for the next 3 years. Franklin shook his head, overwhelmed. "I can't accept this," he said, his voice breaking. Jason's eyes softened. "This isn't charity. It's what family does." The riders around them nodded in silent agreement. Lily peeked out from behind Franklin's leg, her small hand reaching for the pink helmet. "Grandpa, can we ride it?" she asked, her voice filled with innocent hope. Franklin knelt, fastening the helmet gently under her chin. He looked into her wide eyes and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. We can ride." Franklin swung a leg over the Harley, the motion as natural as breathing, and lifted Lily onto the seat in front of him. The bike's engine roared to life, the sound vibrating through the street like a heartbeat. Lily giggled, clutching the handlebars with her tiny hands. "It's loud, Grandpa," she laughed. Franklin's chest swelled. "That's the sound of freedom, Pumpkin," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Jason raised his arm, and one by one, 200 engines thundered back to life, a rolling wave of power and unity. Franklin eased the Harley forward, leading Lily and the procession of riders down Ridgefield's streets. Neighbors waved, some wiping tears from their eyes as the rumble shook windows and hearts alike. They rode past the diner where Franklin and Margaret had shared countless breakfasts, past the back roads where she once stretched her arms into the wind. Franklin could almost feel her there, riding beside them, her laughter echoing in the breeze. The procession stretched for miles, a river of chrome and leather flowing through Ridgefield. Cars pulled over in respect. Veterans saluted. Children on sidewalks waved American flags. The town had never seen anything like it. Franklin glanced down at Lily, her face lit up with pure joy, and for the first time in years, the heavy ache in his chest lifted. Love didn't end with loss, it transformed, carried forward by those who remembered. As they looped back toward home, Franklin felt something he hadn't felt since Margaret passed. Hope. When they returned to his street, the riders parked respectfully along the curbs. Engines shut off, leaving a profound silence. Franklin dismounted, lifting Lily down gently. She hugged him tight, whispering, "That was amazing, Grandpa." Franklin kissed her forehead, whispering back, "It really was." One by one, riders removed their helmets, shaking Franklin's hand, patting his shoulder, some offering brief, tearful embraces. "Thank you for reminding us what family means," one woman said softly. Another whispered, "This ride was for my brother who loved to ride." Stories were exchanged quietly, each rider leaving a piece of themselves behind. Franklin realized this moment wasn't about him alone. It was about all of them, about the unspoken bond that forms when people choose to stand together. Jason stepped forward again, handing Franklin a photograph. It showed the Harley during its rebuild, surrounded by the mechanics, painters, and riders who had worked on it. "We thought you should have this," Jason said. Franklin's hands shook as he held it, his eyes misting. Lily tugged at his sleeve, pointing at the photo. "They fixed it for us, Grandpa." Franklin nodded, his voice breaking. "They did, Pumpkin." They really did. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold, the riders mounted their bikes once more. Engines started softly, the sound now like a hymn. They waved goodbye, rolling away one by one, until the rumble faded into the horizon. Franklin stood in his driveway, Lily's hand in his, watching them disappear. He turned toward the garage, where the rebuilt Harley now gleamed beneath the single bulb. Beside Margaret's old helmet now hung Lily's pink one, the two swaying gently side by side. Franklin whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, Maggie. Thank you for teaching me what matters." Lily skipped to the refrigerator, adding a new drawing, a motorcycle with 3 riders, her, Grandpa, and an angel, with flowing hair beside them. Franklin's heart swelled. Tomorrow they would ride again. But tonight he simply held his granddaughter close, knowing that the meaning of true brotherhood wasn't found in chrome or engines. It was found in love, sacrifice, and the family we build along the way.